Keep the energy moving. The new energy movement. Keep the energy moving. The new energy movement.
Thank you very much for coming out to help launch Breakthrough Power tonight. I'm excited, and I sense that you are too. I can feel the electricity in the air. I'd like to thank Rosiel Young for organizing all our generous New Energy Movement volunteers tonight. And especially thank all the volunteers who were roped into their volunteerism at the last minute, like Richard here, who's going to be a timekeeper for the speakers. I'm Valerie McIntyre. I'm a friend of Jean Manning's, and I am delighted to have been asked to get things started here tonight and sort of tell you how things are going to go. So it looks like everybody's got seats. There may be a few people straggling in, and that's okay. So, yes, there's a lot of energy in the air tonight. We're celebrating the birth of Breakthrough Power, how quantum leap new energy inventions can transform our world. And the books are for sale over there. They'll be available all through the program tonight and afterwards as well. So tonight you're going to meet the authors, Jean Manning and Joel Garvin, and also several researchers who are profiled in the book, who are eager to share their knowledge and also to discuss their work with you later in the evening. Breakthrough Power. Why do we need breakthrough power? Well, the book says, the authors tell us, that products based on petroleum, natural gas, and coal will be useful to humankind for a long time to come. So these industries will remain far into the future. However, for the good of all life on Earth, we must move away from their wasteful and dangerously polluting use as fuels in the transportation, heating, and electricity generation sectors. Breakthrough Power is written in an easy-to-read style with anecdotes and photographs. It introduces a huge topic, why the grassroots effort to bring clean energy abundance to humankind needs the support of regular people everywhere. This book is about solving a dilemma. It's about bringing a new era of energy abundance into view. It's about dedicated scientists in pursuit of cosmic energy and of technologies that mimic nature and that are in harmony with nature, and instead of warring against nature. The book presents a sampling of the rich variety of technological breakthroughs that could replace dirty fuels. You'll read about early energy pioneers, Nikola Tesla, Victor Schauberger, Henry Moray, John Keeley, Walter Russell, and Wilhelm Reich. And you'll read about Floyd Sweet shaking the magnetic field, and Tom Bearden challenging the known laws of physics. You'll also meet members of the current scientific community and discover that there's far more to consider than conventional alternatives like solar and wind technologies. You'll read about cars running on water, about inventions using powerful magnets, and about the difficulty faced by inventors whose work challenges current scientific thinking. Yes, it's definitely an opportune time for a quantum shift in how we power our lives and in how we use our personal power to bring about the change that we want in our world. So, co-authors Joel Garvin and Jean Manning are heaving a sigh of relief tonight, right? And celebrating to write a book about such an important subject at this critical time in history, and to make complicated science and technical information accessible and enjoyable to a lay audience is a truly great accomplishment. And we're all here to mark the occasion. Thanks to Jean and Joel and many dedicated researchers, we're learning a new way of looking at the world. And I quote from the preface, "There are better ways to go. We don't have to resign ourselves to a brutal future." It's energy wake-up time, and Breakthrough Power is the right book for this moment. One fully awake person who's doing his best to awaken others is Joel Garvin, one of the co-authors of Breakthrough Power. Joel Garvin is a scientist with over 20 years' experience in product development and as a technical consultant to the paper, chemical, building products, and water treatment industries. Joel has consulted with dozens of large and small companies in North and South America. He is a highly regarded speaker in the industry, and he regularly instructs classes of engineers. And as well as doing his day job, Joel also speaks passionately whenever he has time in support of new breakthrough energy technologies. Joel is the president of the New Energy Movement based in Portland, Oregon, which is the inspiration for our own New Energy Movement here based in Vancouver. New Energy Movement, also known as NEM, is a grassroots nonprofit organization dedicated to creating a sustainable civilization and a sustainable global economy based on advanced clean energy technologies. Joel is one of those individuals who takes his humanitarian responsibilities seriously, who regularly goes to bat for humanity and for the environment. And last year, he even went to Washington to present an historic piece of legislation calling for federal support for research and development of advanced clean energy technologies. The document is called the Energy Innovation Act, and although it was written for the US, it can be applied in other countries as well. You'll read this document in the book, Breakthrough Power, and you'll also read about Joel's experiences in Washington. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm Canadian welcome to Joel Garvin.
Thank you, Val. That was a very kind introduction. And thank you all for welcoming someone from south of the border in these pretty amazing times. This has been an incredible last couple weeks. And I'm not going to be presumptuous at all in expecting that any of you have been following the political scene down there, because I know you have your own that's going on concurrently with our historic presidential election possibilities down in the U.S. Certainly you are aware of what is impacting all of our pocketbooks and our retirement accounts and portfolios of assets, and that's this economic meltdown that is seemed to be spawned by Wall Street. I think all of this can be tied in to what we are here to talk about and the message that we want to deliver. I think maybe the best way to start is to remind us that we should continually ask this question: what kind of world do we want? What kind of world do we want? And is the world that we've observed in these last 2 weeks that world? It doesn't fit my vision. I doubt it fits any of yours. It certainly doesn't fit the vision for the legacy that we have in the children, including the little Rio here, who is Jean's granddaughter, and she's incredibly bright. I have my own daughters and now a 1-year-old granddaughter, and so it always keeps in the front of my mind what our obligation is to these who come after us. So what kind of world do we want? I mean, we can envision something where we have a world full of abundance for everybody. It's a shared abundance. We have a world of cooperation, where we have a world with clean skies, silent streets, even when vehicles are traveling on them, where you can actually have a conversation curbside, even in the middle of rush hour traffic. That's a possibility that new energy promises us. And the quaint idea of having gone to war for oil. How absurd. And I hope that when Rio is, let's say, 20, she can look back and say, did this really happen? Did you guys really do that, Mommy? That doesn't make any sense. I'm glad that we don't have to do that. You know, those are the types of things that I hold in my vision is a world of peace. One where there's no need to struggle in competition for scarce resources. We can use these promising new technologies to share a tremendous abundance with everybody and dissolve this heavy, heavy blanket of fear that's been so pervasive all around us. It just saturates the media. I know there's so many times where I just don't want to hear it anymore at all, even though I try to detach myself from the energy of that heavy fear blanket, but more just try to be aware of what's going on, and there is a difference. And I think that's something that is a good way to discriminate against being addicted to all the bad news, which I think a lot of people are, but very importantly, being part of the informed citizenry that's critical to what we need to do and what we're here to talk about. Okay, so we've observed these last few weeks and few days, our economic and political structures have failed us, miserably failed us. And those structures have been polluted. They've been polluted by greed. They've been polluted by vested interests that have way too much influence on policy, and that they've been polluted by a power lust. And I know the citizens in my country, and I'm sure here in Canada as well, are outraged at what has been going on, that the public trust has been violated in such an overt and just unseemly manner. Well, the public's crying out for change in leadership. But that cry for change needs to be for wise leadership, not just a change. It needs to be for wise leadership, visionary leadership. And in our book, Breakthrough Power, and in the messages that Jean and I deliver in our address to citizens in gatherings such as these, there's a message that we repeat consistently. And it's that the single most highly leveraged opportunity we have to make advancement towards solving complex global problems lies in a transformation in the way humanity generates and utilizes energy. It's a mouthful, I know that. But if you examine it closely, you find that energy it pervades every aspect of our life, from food production to transportation to why we have military forces to our geopolitical structures and positioning. It's everywhere we look. And so if we're envisioning this world that we want, and it's clearly not coming about from our current policies, we need to make changes not just in those policies, but in the foundation that underlies them. And that foundation is the energy market itself. So when we look at the energy market, what do we see? What do we see with our current policies? Again, we see a structure that has failed us. And for the same exact reasons that the political and the economic structures have failed us. It's been greed, it's been undue vested interest, and it's been power lust. And those are all understandable because we all have our own vested interest tendencies. We all have a personal stake in something that we feel is so important that we sometimes exert our will on others. So we all can understand this as humans, that this has been going on. But as conscious humans, we also know we can make a choice to rise to something better. And we're not looking for retaliation, retribution, or vengeance. What we do want to have is a cooperative effort, including with those who may have been oppressive, and ask them to join us in the cause for a new tidal wave of wisdom to bring tremendous changes to this planet. We need an urgent change in the energy direction. We need a change in policy, not just putting lipstick on dirty coal and calling it clean coal. So some of you have been following what's going on down south. Okay, but we do need truly non-polluting technologies, not nuclear technologies that have been spoken about enthusiastically again and again by the two leading presidential candidates in the U.S., because that's not going to get us where we need to go. It's not the world that we envision to simply pass off toxic radioactive waste to these future generations. That's not the world that I want. I don't want that for my children or grandchildren, nor for yours. So wise leadership needs to wake up and realize that that should not even be an option on the table. What about a massive investment in the research and development and deployment of breakthrough energy technologies? A massive investment. Well, what are we doing instead? There's a call for more oil drilling. How does that get us the world that we want? Why is it that one of the leading candidates, in this case Senator Obama, he says, well, get this, I'm going to invest $15 billion over the next 10 years to invest in renewable energy technologies. $15 billion over 10 years. Sounds like a lot. Well, guess what? The U.S. spends $15 billion every 6 weeks in Iraq. We've been doing that for 5 years. And it looks like we're going to keep doing it for at least the near foreseeable future. All right, where are the priorities? How is that wise leadership? How does that get us the world that we want? We have the citizens of my country now just been saddled with a near $1 trillion obligation to bail out Wall Street and banks. Now, how is it that we can fund all of these massive investments in war and massive bailout for irresponsible and greedy behavior when we haven't been able to allocate a small fraction of that to what is in the best interest of our planet? How is that possible? It's because there's a profound lack of wisdom, a profound lack of leadership. And we cannot expect the leadership that we seek to come from the politics as usual. It's not going to happen. That's why it's so important for us to have the leaders come from average, everyday citizens like each of us gathered here. And that's my call to each of you. So Gene and I and our wonderful group of inventors here who are joining us to deliver a message have hope that we are offering to you here tonight and going forward. And that hope is not idle, it's not starry-eyed, it's real, because the technologies behind this are real. And each of these inventors are going to have a chance to give you their own personal perspective on that. So with a very real basis in technologies that are the platform for revolutionary change in energy, it means we can transform a world that's plagued by fear. It has resource scarcity in the minds of people everywhere. It has us looking at an environment that's in devastating decline. I heard the other day that 1/4 of the planet's mammals are endangered, and virtually all the primates as well. Well, you know, when that's happening, we're endangering ourselves as well. Well, we can transform that world to one that's healthier, cleaner, happier for all of us. It's based on shared abundance. It's based on cooperation, and it results in peace, real peace, not truce, because all that we've had for as long as I've been alive, and I think probably for all of humanity, all that we've ever really had is truce. Because with truce, the arms are always kept at the ready. Real peace, the arms no longer are required. And that's a real distinction I'd like to make. I want to give you 2 quick examples of why this is real. Forgive me for going over my time here. All right, one of these is a fascinating technology, and it was actually featured on one of the slides here by a company called Blacklight Power, the brainchild of a genius inventor and scientist named Dr. Randall Mills. And Dr. Mills has invented this process he calls the blacklight process that really breaks new ground in physics. And what it does is it basically is a reaction between hydrogen and a very common metal, that acts as a catalyst. When these react under heated conditions, there's a tremendous change that happens in the hydrogen, something previously thought impossible. The hydrogen atom itself actually shrinks. And I'm not going to go into the technical detail of the chemistry of that. But when that happens, when that atom shrinks, it releases a tremendous amount of energy. And this was thought impossible from the laws of quantum physics. So there's a lot of physicists who thought this was ridiculous, what Dr. Mills has discovered. But now more and more their eyes are being opened to see that, whoa, there is something really here. This technology has been vetted by several physicists and chemists. And he is fortunate that he has a very high-powered team of business folks, credentialed scientists behind him now. And he's launching his process next year to start replacing the polluting fossil fuel that's used for our central power generation at power plants with the black light power process, which is non-polluting and it's recyclable, the process itself. And the hydrogen that comes to this process is generated from water instead of from natural gas. So this is a tremendous breakthrough, and you hardly ever see a blurb about it unless you know where to look. Well, guess what? It's in Breakthrough Power. You can read about it there, and you can find it with links from the New Energy Movement websites and the New Energy Congress website. That's one technology. Another one is water as fuel technologies for powering vehicles. There's an inventor who's no longer among us, but his name was Stanley Meyer. And he invented a process that could break down water using a novel electronic technique into hydrogen and oxygen and use that as the fuel for his vehicle. And he had vetted by several credentialed witnesses a car that got 190 miles to the gallon. All right. Well, you think that was welcomed into the market? No, it wasn't. Well, fortunately, there's a lot of folks who are trying to resurrect that technology or bring out a hybrid of that type of technology, and some that might even be better. One of the groups that is helping to lead that effort is Dr. Stephen Greer, who has inaugurated a project called the Orion Project. Well, those are a couple of technologies, and I'm not going to take much more of your time here, but I do want to just give a quick acknowledgement to those who have served as my own mentors in this journey. First among them is Dr. Brian O'Leary. Dr. O'Leary, for decades, had investigated around the world claims of anomalous energy technologies and other phenomena, and he was willing to put his own scientific credentials at risk and also be the brunt of a lot of ridicule and even what some might call blackballing of him from the mainstream because of his passion to seek out what is true. And Brian is about truth. And he's taught me a lot along the way about what I might expect as I explore and try to take this topic of new energy into political circles and other mainstream circles. And I've learned a lot from him in that regard. And Brian's a dear friend. He also is the founder of New Energy Movement. And I've been privileged to serve as the president of the U.S. A nonprofit organization and continue in the line that Brian established. Also, Dr. Stephen Greer, who I mentioned earlier, has been another mentor of mine, both through my work with him on the Disclosure Project, which examines how we might bring out into the public domain technologies that have been secreted into these black budget projects over the last number of decades. Because there's a number of breakthrough energy technologies and advanced propulsion technologies that have been kept from the public, even though they've been developed with taxpayer dollars. Tom Vallone also is another wonderful researcher. He's been a real champion of zero-point energy technology. He also serves on the board of New Energy Movement. He's been a mentor and friend. And then, of course, there's Jean Manning. Jean has been more than a mentor. She's been a friend. She is a sister in spirit. And Brian had suggested New Energy Movement as a worthy endeavor and invited Jean and I to be among the first on his board of directors of New Energy Movement. And Jean and I met for the first time there, even though I had been well aware of her for some time. her book, The Coming Energy Revolution, which is a classic, launched 12 years ago. And here we are 12 years later, and so much of what she revealed and portrayed in that book of her vision that these things will come about in those years between 1996 and the early new millennium. Apparently, we're stymied. But yet here we are again, renewed and with a lot more eyes on it this time. A critical mass, ready to make this happen. And it's going to happen. And Jean is one of these incredible people who she gives all the praise and credit to everybody else and rarely acknowledges how much she's put into it. And I'll tell you, she's so inspirational to me, and she's a dear sister. And Jean, I'd like you to come up and address everybody and let us hear your message.
Said it all. About all that I can say is that a person who is non-technical, like myself, can learn the basics of what the issues that we need to understand around energy technologies. It's not necessarily to be a nuclear physicist like our friend here in the front row, although it helped. But we ordinary people can understand the need for clean energy technologies. And we can understand that it's possible to have technologies that are, surprise, surprise, in harmony with nature. And we can understand that in the 20th century, we went in the direction of a mechanistic science that was dealing with nature's movements that involve breaking down, like nature composts what it doesn't need anymore, and it burns its waste. And so heat, noise, friction, they're all part of nature's movements that are used to get rid of something that's not necessarily, and there's a mess involved. But we have people here like William Baumgartner who can go into great depth on this. But that's what excited me about the whole field, is when I realized that it wasn't just about, better mousetrap, better invention. It was about working in harmony with nature, and that's where my heart is. I'm an idealistic person, and people have asked me why I ended up in this scene. And it's, I guess it goes back to just basics that I assume everybody feels that way. A high school teacher made a big deal over an essay that I wrote when he asked us for our philosophy of life, and I said, well, I basically would like to leave the world a little bit better than was, for my having been here, and I was really surprised in everybody, and I'm sure everybody, I know everybody does, but I guess they don't wear it on their sleeve like that. And there was another time when somebody asked me basically the same question. It was at one of the Tesla technology conferences in Colorado Springs, and an engineer from Toronto, a consulting engineer that John Hutchison knows very well known, he came up behind me. I was sitting in the middle of a meeting hall, and I would just be there with my steno notebook and my camera and my tape recorders so that I could record the words of these scientists and take them home, not take the scientists home, take the notes home and transcribe the tapes, and in the process I learned a lot by transcribing the tapes. And At the time, I was writing articles for a magazine called Explore. The publisher, Christine Jackson, didn't have money to pay me, but she had lots of air miles because she back and forth to Germany a lot. So she provided the transportation so that I could go to these international conferences where the experts were speaking, and that was the best place to find them all clustered together and interview them. It was a lot more efficient than traveling to each of their homes and labs, although I did a lot of that too eventually when I had a Canada Council grant for travel. So anyway, he comes up, taps me on the shoulder, and he asked, what does motivate you to come to these? And I kind of realized where he was coming from with the question, because I'd heard people's little paranoid stories about industrial spies in our midst, and or people with the Alphabet Soup Agency background, which was pretty funny. And I'd even overheard in the hall some whispering, well, who is she with? You know? So in those days, there were very few women engineers, so I did kind of stick out like a sore thumb. There were a lot of men in the audience, as I know, because I talked to them, they weren't scientists or engineers either, but they were there to learn. They were curious and they wanted to learn about this non-conventional energy technology field. And I was there for the same reason. I was curious and I wanted to learn about it. And well, maybe a little step farther, I had decided that I wanted to write a book someday when I felt that I knew enough to write a book. So I debated whether to give him my answer because it was so simple. But I did. I said, well, I'm here to educate myself, and someday, when the time is right, I'd like to write a book about this subject. And it's all about helping to create a clean world for my children and eventually grandchildren. And I would take my vacations to go to these conferences in Europe or North America to educate myself. Well, my point here is you don't need to go to that extent. You know, you don't have to take your vacations to go and interview scientists. It's really a lot more. It's really simple now with the internet, so much information on it. Start with our book. There's a resource list in the back of it, more websites. When I mention websites, I always want to mention, Joel mentioned the New Energy Congress. There's a website that I have as my home page, I guess you say, zpenergy.com, or the Canadian zpenergy.com, short for Zero Pollution Energy. And one of our New Energy Movement co-founders, Vlad, is here, and he has a proposal for an extreme science foundation that would be a way to fund getting these inventions tested by accredited testing labs. And let's just really answer this question once and for all. Because articles, even journal articles, don't seem to convince anybody. The field that's been misnamed cold fusion, and it's probably not even fusion as it turns out, but you know, there's something going on there that does create anomalous excess heat. That in the mainstream jargon, cold fusion is still kind of synonymous for joke. You know, like, oh, this is another cold fusion fiasco, or this is voodoo science like cold fusion. It's really crazy, folks. And the same with the technologies based on what some people call zero-point energy, quantum vacuum, or there was an ancient term, the ether, which, as it turns out, there is this background energy of space. It's not as the ancients considered some unmoving fluid substance. It's a dynamic substratum, but there is something that these inventions and powerful permanent magnets are tapping into for the strength to provide these over unity effects, over unity more output than input. But there are these basics that are so easy for any of us lay people to understand in this harmonious new technologies. And one of them, and one that's really pervasive throughout a lot of the classes of inventions, is resonance. Now, if you're a musician, you know what resonance is. Resonant frequencies are involved in a lot of fields, and how they come into the new energy technologies is the fact that so many things have their own resonant frequency materials, electronic circuits, resonant electronic circuits. And I won't go into any farther, but it is just yet another explanation or mechanism for this more output than input. Look, one example is pushing a child on a swing. You build up momentum with small, well-timed pushes. You know, you don't just take one big swing, you know, and that's it. Well, you just stand there with just a little gentle push at the right time, and that's basically what resonance does in some of these electronic type inventions. So it's interesting that the 12-year cycles that this scene has gone through, I think we're coming into the beginning of another and higher level. I look back at 1984. Personally, for me, that was a year when I moved to Penticton, and I hung out at a home of an inventor, and his wife had a house full of books about Tesla, and they had visitors from South Africa and Germany and all over the place that were coming to talk about non-conventional energy technologies. In his case, it was magnetic-based, and he called his company Prawn Technology because he acknowledged that these powerful new permanent magnets must be tapping into some background source of energy that wasn't being acknowledged in mainstream science at that time. And so in looking for what could it be, he even went to the alternative health field and said, okay, you recognize in acupuncture, you recognize this subtle energy, chi it's called, or prana, or whatever. So that was a real eye-opener, hanging out at their house and that. But it wasn't just my personal journey that was kind of at a certain stage of excitement about new energy. In 1984, that's when some conferences under the title of non-conventional energy technology were held. So it was a kind of a flurry of activity then. And then around 1996, when the Coming Energy Revolution came out, as it happens, several books came out at the same time, like the one that I most admired and probably talked about more than I talked about the Coming Energy Revolution and promoted was called Living Energies by Callum Coates. It was a time of great excitement, and then over the next 12 years, things kind of wound down with 9/11. It seemed like fear paralyzed a lot of people. Really, it was really sad to see the level of fear among some of my inventor friends. But now we are 2008. I really have the feeling, and this is why breakthrough power is so timely. I really have the feeling that we're ready for a new cycle, and that it's not going to be stopped this time. It's not going to be stalled by all the various tricks and machinations that stalled it during the last 12 years. And I could talk for quite a while, but I won't, about the fact that, you know, I used to think that suppression of energy technologies, well, I don't know, I don't want to get in that category of believing things like that. It's, you're going to be a conspiracy theorist. You're really going to get labeled if you talk about things like that. But as I personally got to know some very credible people and got to know their integrity and know their families and their associates, and when those people told me stories, they weren't just stories. I could see the pain in their eyes that these things really happened to them. The threats, the laboratories trashed, the business tricks that wherein they got lured into some very unfortunate business situation and ended up with more than egg on their face. They ended up sometimes in court battles and trouble. It's sad. I could probably very quickly think of a dozen people whom I know personally and admire, and some of them are no longer with us, who had in one way or another been suppressed. But Joel and I want to really focus on, that was then, this is now. This is the start of a new cycle. This is the age when there's so much information being disseminated on the internet and so many people cooperating on the internet to share their knowledge. And we talk in the book Breakthrough Power about open source as a venue for getting out the knowledge. Because the whole goal is a society of peace, justice, and sharing. And it is possible. People, it really is possible. There's some really beautiful people on this planet that are giving all their heart and soul to working towards peace, justice, and sharing. I think I've gone way over time, so we're going to start introducing our special guests tonight that we're really, really fortunate to have with us.
Nassim Haramein is a breakthrough physicist. And I'll tell you, it's amazing how many times before I first met Nassim, which was it was a couple years ago in May on Big Island at a conference there called the Earth Transformation Conference that Dr. Michael Salo was hosting. And for years I had heard about Nassim. And you have to meet Nassim. And I thought, well, I wonder if I'm ever going to have that opportunity. And finally I did, and it was at this conference. But it turns out I was the one slated to speak after him. And when you hear what this man has to say, I'm going, you know, so it was wonderful to have the chance to finally meet you, Nassim, there. Nassim Haramein has, in his career, broken through boundaries of physics. He has challenged the current physics models on a number of points that appeared to be flawed, and he has been probing for the completion of the answers to those missing links. And he has done pioneering work in the underlying geometry that is material reality. And it's fascinating to see how he has put this together. And I encourage you to pursue his work. Nassim, we invite you to speak to us for the next 15 minutes. Give him a real taste of what you're all about.
Thank you, Joel. It was my honor to meet you on the Big Island that time. And thank you, Jean, for inviting me. It's so great to be here. I'm so honored to be here with you all today. It's really, you know, I feel it's really important moment in the history of humanity. This moment we're experiencing this month with everything that's going on, and I think this event is really a culmination of this new beginning. This new beginning, as the old crumble, the new emerge, and this is the new. This is the new possibility for the planet, the new possibility for humanity, and a new possibility for our children and grandchildren. And I want to mention as well that Jean and Joe, you know, are pioneer and they're giants. You know, I feel humbled to be here. They have done so much to bring awareness of this change in mentality and this change in conceptual notion of our world and our reality into the public, and reaching out to folks around the world, just like you and I, you know, like people that have, you know, good logic and, you know, what I call common sense, which is not so common, you know, and that just is so important. And in one way, you know, it takes a lot of courage to do that. So thank you so much for your work, because it as well opens the way for people like these inventors and I that have, you know, worked in the dark corners in some laboratory setting or some desk somewhere writing formulas, to like be able to bring it to the world and you know, typically we're not going to get the support of the established scientific community. But if we get the support of the public at large because it makes sense, because it has common sense, then we are able to push and force the established community to take a look at it, a real look, you know. And there's a big difference between skepticism and closed-mindedness. And that difference is not so well understood, right? Skepticism is approaching something with intent to understand it and to evaluate it. Closed-mindedness is refusing to look at it altogether. And, you know, that happens a lot. And I've been in those situations. I've had to sit and stand in front of some of the biggest physics, you know, buff in the world and tell them that they're fundamentally wrong about some things, you know. They've got a lot of good things going, but they're fundamentally wrong about some other things. And one of those is that you can look at the world and think that things in the world defines the space. Or you can look at the world and say the space defines the things. And so far, it has been the former attitude that has prevailed. The idea that things are standalone, that they can be isolated, you know. I mean, the cat in the box, you know. Just as an example, you know, the concept that you can put a cat in a box and you don't know what it's doing, could be alive, could be dead. Does it really matter? Does the universe know, or is it what you know that's important? What's important is what the universe knows. The universe knows exactly what's happening with that cat. And what you know is really irrelevant. And if you actually could tap into the universe a little bit, you probably could know without having to open the box. And so what this is in analogy to quantum theory, uncertainty principles, and subatomic particles. And what I'm saying here, you know, in a funny way, but what I'm saying is really fundamental. That is that in the concept that the structure of space, from that structure emerge all things and all things return to, starts to give us a foundation for a new concept of energy, a new concept of gravity, a new concept of electromagnetism, and the forces of nature that comes together that produces our material world. And from that view, the material world does not look so material anymore. It starts to vacillate. It's tough all of a sudden to pinpoint which part exactly is that little billiard ball you're telling me about, right? That little atom you're thinking of. And when you start looking closer and closer, you find that that little atom not only exhibit immense energy dynamics, but as well is mostly space. It's mostly empty in our understanding of space. And so where is that energy potential come from? Well, in quantum theory, causation is not addressed. That is, they'll tell you, oh, well, it all started in the Big Bang. The Big Bang has become the god of science. If you don't know where it comes from, it came from the Big Bang. And then if you ask, well, where did the Big Bang come from? That's voodoo. Now you gotta go to church. Don't ask me, just go to church. Right? Well, you know, my view is that maybe we need to understand the source of that energy structure. And it became clear to me that the natural world, I was very involved in climbing, I was very involved in skiing and mountaineering and so on. I observed the material world very closely, and I could see that the material world was like a growth of the vacuum structure, that the space-time manifold was emerging and producing very specific pattern structures in space that we called material world, but that it emerged from space itself. That space was extending itself and looking back at itself in this consciously dynamically coupled, absolutely, as it carries information along a feedback loop of information structure that define a very specific field geometry. And I went about to find what is that field geometry, and that took me 20 years. And I thought, and throughout this exploration, I realized that the application of that understanding could have huge impact on society. That is, if we could find that fundamental pattern of creation, if we could find how the vacuum extends itself and feed back on itself, then we would have the key to the fundamental structure of space. And with that key, we would have access to literally an infinite amount of energy and curvature of space-time, which equates gravitational control and so on. And so I started to study very intensely physics in its depth. And I found some of the difficulties that physicists had encountered. And I started, because of my approach, I was seeing past those difficulties into maybe a way to solve them. And this weekend I'm gonna present some material that I have not published yet, that I just finished, which solve equation that proves, literally, mathematically proves, that atoms, every single atom you're made of, which is billions and billions and trillions of atoms, each one of them is a mini black hole. Each one of them has an infinite potential singularity at its center, and it produces the effect that we call the electron cloud. And that's why it has all these unusual dynamics, like it spins for billions of years non-stop, at near the speed of light, and all these things. But beyond the fact that this can be applied to technology, beyond the fact that all of a sudden physics would start regarding the world as a fractal structure of the space itself, beyond the fact that it would start regarding the material world at different scale, black hole, what I call black hole white hole, or black hole H-O-L-E, W-H-O-L-E. Beyond that is the fact that realizing that this infinite nature is actually present in you, in every one of your atoms, and that because of that infinite nature, you are connected to all things in the universe at all time, that you're dependent on the structure of the vacuum for every billionth of a second that you exist, that you are actually exchanging information with all of the universe through every one of your atoms right now in this room in order to breathe, experience, assimilate the information, and feedback information, that you are an active participant in the universe creation right now, is the ultimate understanding, the ultimate message of this new energy technology. That is, the energy, the technology, and you are one. And you're... And you're not one in an esoteric way that is not really palpable, that's not really able to be understood. It's one. You're one with everything in actual physical mathematical way that I can write an equation and tell you why. And that is necessary for your cognitive mind. And it's necessary for your survival. Because if we can write the equations, if we can make the mainstream scientific community understand the theoretical functions of it, then we stand a chance to be able to apply it in the most powerful way to our society and move on to a new level of existence, which I call the galactic society. A society that is no longer confined to the surface of their planet, that has infinite amount of goods, infinite amount of power. A society that lives in abundance instead of scarcity, that has a concept that value is only based on the creativity of the one that has it in hand. And that, I believe, is the ultimate. This is what I visualize when I see our future. That's what I visualize when I look at the eyes of my 3-year-old and when I think of his children. And I think we're just on the cusp. We're so close. And when I see what's going on in the media right now and what's going on in politics right now and all this, I see the old crumbling and the limitations crumbling. And have no fear. The wealth is not going anywhere. It's just changing hands. And it's going from their hands to our hands. It's going from the concepts of scarcity, the concepts of deterioration, the concepts of entropy, to the concepts of centropy, over unity, abundance, and ultimately the thriving of our society and our world. And so in this, I'm glad to be with you. I'm glad to be part of this. I'm honored to be part of this. And I want to encourage you to to expand your horizon. Don't be afraid of advanced engineering or advanced physics and all this, because I tell you, if it's right, it's really simple. And you can understand it, and don't be afraid to understand it. Doesn't matter how old or young, whatever, your background, you can understand it, and because it is what fundamentally you're made of. And it is fundamentally at your heart, at the heart of your it, and you will recognize it. So thank you so much for having me.
Okay, we're not all inventors here, but we've, in our book, quoted some really wise people, and we're lucky to have one of them living on the North Shore of Vancouver. John Wong is a retired engineer who senses something encouraging happen, even in today's troubled era. And in the electronics and software scene, he witnessed a change in how processes developed in today's culture. So we quoted him on the topic of open sourcing, the open source culture that's growing so fast in the internet world, and it relates to very much to a way for inventors of breakthrough energy systems to share their discoveries with the world. So John Wong took early retirement, and now his wisdom is reaching hundreds of people, and he'll soon have a website up to pass on more of this. John, would you come up talk with us? I like this.
Okay, I'm a writer and not a speaker, so you have to bear with me. I just want to cover two very quick topics because I actually wrote a long essay, but I only have 2 minutes, so. So the first one is about the human technology interface, and the second is about this open source. So in the first part, the human technology interface, I mentioned that, like it seems that about this fractal geometry, that is a recursive cycle of creativity. So I noticed that also in the sociology, the same is true in this cycle of emergence, where the technology of the language, the communication, the technology feeds the progress of society, which in turn promotes further language, communication, technology. So this is a recursive cycle of a human technology interface which advances civilization towards a more complex organization and towards a higher level of consciousness. So it was actually, in terms of technology, it was a Canadian professor, Marshall McLuhan, who in 1964 delineated how the medium affects the society, even more so than the content, and that the medium is the message. Global, village, and surfing were the iconic words that he came up with to discuss the electronic revolution, which at that time was happening, and particularly with the internet and the World Wide Web. So he called this the electronic nervous system, which is an extension of our own nervous system that actually encompasses, stretches all over the world, much more so than before. Instead of being local, now it's through the internet. We also have, in the social structure, exactly the same things happening. In the old days, it used to be the top-down, authoritarian type of structure, and with the Web 2 and also the social grassroots movement, it's actually coming from the bottom up. So it's totally different. It's more decentralized, and it's more true to the true democracy that is coming up in this social transformation. And they're happening simultaneously, and they both reinforce each other. So, I actually have further hypothesis that I came up myself, and what I said was that the internet has changed the way that we communicate and the way that we live. And as powerful as it is only the beginning of the evolution of human communication 2.0, I call it. And the internet was based on uses the World Wide Web as a basis of communications. And I hypothesized that human consciousness will grow to an extent to this collective consciousness that will resemble the new sphere as envisaged by Teilhard de Chardin many years ago. And this human mind that is going to be global, we can tap into it into this global consciousness or the quantum field for non-communication, non-local communication, has proven by the most profound experiment of the 20th century. This is the Allen aspect EPR experiment that was done in 1982, and it's, I don't have time to go into that right now, but it's very interesting, and that is going to transform society. I think I'm probably due already. I want to say that both Jean and Joe is doing an excellent work on the technology side, and there's a correspondence social transformation that's happening, and the website that I'm going to be developing is going to try to merge these together, and hopefully it's going to advance this new transformation that's happening.
William Baumgartner is one of the inventors we feature in the book, and William's been involved in engineering all of his life. He was educated in Switzerland, spent a lot of time engineering Tesla technology over the last 40 years, and he's been a consummate inventor. and developing a lot of prototypes, various different type of energy platforms, always looking for the best combination to be able to tap free energy for use in homes and businesses and vehicles. And something that William has addressed before in the question about is this suppression that has occurred in the past, is it going to continue? And he's told us directly, no, there's too many of us now. And we got to take that to heart. So basically, you are the expert in North America for the Schauberger technology, Walter Russell technology, and we'd like to hear your own comments. You know, are these new energy technologies for real?
Yes. Yes, there is. I've been in this free energy movement for myself for about, I think, 35 years, on and off, with some success sometimes and a lot of failures on the other hand. But those things happen. We learn from mistakes. And my mentors were Victor Schauberger and Walter Russell and Tesla. This is what I base my my knowledge on, and so I don't think there's much to say except that I understand that we have tables here, and if you have any questions or more in details here about inventions and of Schauberger's and myself, and so I will leave it with that. Thank you.
Our next person I'd like to introduce is one of the most tenacious advocates of clean energy I know. In my previous book, The Coming Energy Revolution, I wrote about Martin Berger's work with Nova, an ocean energy company that's now named Blue Energy Canada. Martin Berger came up from Oregon to be with us tonight. Martin?
Technologies, yeah, the place is raining with them. I found the Davis turbine and Blue Energy's aerospace finesse kit, and there's no brainer that the tides are there every day, and for the same, well, First Narrows here under the Lionsgate Bridge, 8 knots translates to a wind force equivalent of 2 Hurricane Mitchells. So 400 per hour wind speed, density, energy densities, and stuff like that. All that stuff makes sense. But as I was trying to do the business planning and get the organizational development together, and I just had the observation, and it became evident that this thing was behaving quantumly. This thing was quantum, and I started networking, and I had some mentors. Jean introduced me to my good friend, Dr. Hazel Henderson. She introduced me to some more futurists, and I came to appreciate that people like John and Bill and Schauberger, Tesla, all these people, they had the devices, they had the insights, they had the vision. And so basically you could quantify the technology side of it, and capitalism, in spite of what's happened in the last little while, it behaves like gravity. It's predictable. It will come to the opportunity if everything's right. But Hazel and her futurist friends were able to instill in me an appreciation for the fact that we're really in an infancy in consciousness ourselves in humanity. And we're at a critical juncture today, and I think there's optimism here today as well. But I really think, when you look at my background from the Cree tribe, I grew up with the Dene, and there was a quantum integration in their consciousness. And our Western viewpoint is kind of linear in a material perspective. But I guess we can cut it short. The guy's cutting me off here with time, but basically, we've got 6.5 billion units of consciousness firing into our shared experience called our future. And until that signal has a sufficient gravity, a quantum mass, we will not achieve or experience that future. Today is a product of that field of consciousness from a previous period. Okay, people like Gene Manning and Joel, they play a very important role in this work. Gene's earlier book, The Coming Energy Revolution. I still get emails from people all around the world. Oh, Blue Energy, and Gene Manning, Energy Revolution. You have to have the possibility of a clean, harmonious future sufficiently etched and formulated in our minds before we're ever going to experience it. And I've played the game in the corporate level, investment banking level, technology level, all those things. But when you have 10 pieces essential to do the thing, to make a difference, if you don't have that 100th monkey on board, one of them will kick out. You just try and force the last two together. Oops, you lost three that you thought you already had them together. So they'll behave quantumly until there's a maturation of possibility sufficiently formed. And these people are the ones that are carrying that burden. I can bring 450 technologies in my 25 years I've looked at. I've got a half a dozen here in the shirt pocket. How many do you want? There's lots of solutions here. But until people participate in something fundamental like energy, okay, we all walk in the house and flip on the switch, that's the end of the story. This is fundamental. And until you get off it and start participating, start getting informed. The internet is a wonderful resource, and that ultimately, I think, when we look back at this period, will be what made the difference. But it's the cutting edge work of pioneers in the consciousness of the possibility. These people did that job.
Of all the researchers we have in the new energy scene, there are very few that have had as much publicity as John Hutchison with all the television shows and radio interviews he's done. John, will you come up and tell us a bit about the crystal converter? I certainly do.
Oh, here I stand. Oh, I feel like a president talking here. Anyway, yes, Jeannie, I mentioned to Jean that we were going to work on the crystal power cell converter, crystal converter as it's known. My friend in Toronto, George Hathaway, said it would take $200,000 and about 2 years to develop it. And we're going to try and develop it with Charles Bombardier, who's sponsoring a TV show I'm doing called The Experimental Factory, that was still lagging on and on and on. It's been going on for 3 years since they're doing the race to space. So this would be a prime, whoops. I used to, one of these things that's moving around here. Must be the levitation. But anyway, moving right along here, I felt that the power cell that utilizes this zero-point energy, it seems to conform with also Dr. Franklin Mead's patent on a zero-point energy collector using barium titanate, which IBM now has bought up all the patent rights to it, meaning that there's a product coming out in some form. But anyway, getting into the crystal converter using common minerals, common rocks and things like that, can be produced on a very fast rate, factory compatible, manufactured at high speed, and actually molded and ruggedized in any form you want. So it's got a lot of potential, I feel, and George Hathaway feels, Charles Bombardier feels it also. So all we need to do, I've had to be in Belcourt by now, but I really am proud of Gene Manning to put together this book with a lot of interesting people in it that are doing incredible things, and I'd like to congratulate you all and keep up the great work, and I'll let her go.
I just want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank our volunteers, starting with our MC, Val McIntyre, who's from my writing group, which is 3 McIntyres and 1 Manning. And Carol was there. And especially I want to thank the New Energy Movement Canada. My dear friends in the New Energy Movement Canada have just rallied and made this happen with the leadership of Raziel Young, our organizer. Sandra Tate has organized the book table. And the members of the New Energy Movement Canada have just really touched me with their generous help tonight. Thank you.
This is great. This should happen in every city on this planet, and it's going to. So join us in this tidal wave of wisdom we're trying to create. And Val, I'd like you to come on up, let people know what's for the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if we didn't know it before, we know it now. We can help to bring in viable energy alternatives. I want to tell you that Dennis Bushnell, PhD, who's a chief scientist at NASA's Langley Research Center, says that new, decentralized, advanced technologies are quite capable of saving us from energy-related devastation if society seriously supports the new systems fast enough. He says the entrenched industries and entrenched politics of industrial age energy systems will only respond quickly enough to a major public movement and outcry. So it's up to you and me. There are other new energy books aimed at technical experts, but the non-techies need to understand this topic too. So all you scientists and inventors and engineers and researchers in the audience tonight, Breakthrough Power is the book to buy for the significant others in your life, so that they'll understand and support what you're all about. Do your Christmas shopping here tonight. We all need to be able to judge whether new technologies are harmful and chosen because they're motivated by making easy profits, or whether they're actually in harmony with nature and serving the best interests of humanity and the planet. And let's give copies of this book to our friends, to our MLAs, to our MPs, our Prime Minister. Let's give copies of this book to environmentalists, to Council of Canadian members, to teachers, to academics, and all public figures who are speaking out about climate change. Folks, this book needs to reach the mass consciousness, right? This is it.
It's time for courage to face greed's abuse. For a new power, we the people choose. Keep the energy moving till the earth is clean and cool. Technology's proven the new ways that we can school. It's true, love's coming through into the world view. Move, energy, move. The quantum source is shining brighter than the sun. The 0 point is rising and everyone keep the energy moving till the earth is clean and cool. Technology's proven the new ways that we can school. It's true, love's coming through into the world view. Move, energy, move. Yeah, I see the day for children beyond the fossil fuels. Without the nuclear waste and the corporate rule, now I welcome all changes. free power for all. Move energy, move. Let's move one. Without the nuclear waste and the corporate rule now, I welcome all changes. I stop people to free power for